Well, we are now into part two of two, with Reid Johnson, the head coach of Pelham. And our first part, we talked a lot about his experience getting into the sport of rowing, and now we're in the meat of it. Now we're in understanding his experience at Princeton, which is one of the most successful rowing programs at the collegiate level, an Ivy League school, an Eastern Sprints League school, and his time at Pelham. So Reid, day two of two with us, man. This is great. I want to know when we already know that your day one was handling the launches and the buoy markers at Princeton. Walk me through your coaching experience at Princeton. Who are you focused on, and really like that experience with Greg as your leader at the program.
Sure. So there's definitely multifaceted approach to this, as you can imagine. Being the intern assistant, you're sort of the expectations are pretty wide open. So right off the top, when I first got to Princeton, like we talked about yesterday, I started working with the other assistant coaches and Steve Huber, the boatman. And getting the boathouse ready for the upcoming fall season. That was coursework, getting the launches ready, making sure the docks were all secured, rigging up boats with the other heavyweight assistant coaches, rigging up the oars, and all this is very much to Greg Hughes' specifications. So we took our lead from him there, and then as the student athletes started coming back to campus, getting to know them, sitting down with them, just talking it through. When I first started, I was the ripe old age of 24, so not too much older than those kids or those guys. Yeah, it was a pretty surreal experience, like especially starting off because the team had come off a very successful 2015, where the varsity had medaled at both sprints and IRAs, and then
was that the year that they had they raced Harvard. And there's this video on YouTube of the race. Yeah. It was like bow ball to bow ball the entire way. It was like one of the most exciting races I've seen. Was it that year?
I don't know, Alex. I think that might be 2011. Not to try to keep this pointed, but Princeton and Greg have done a tremendous amount, and I can get into this more with social media. And so they were sort of at the forefront of that game on YouTube. They actually were the broadcast folks. Like they used their setup for Eastern Sprints actually in, I believe, 2011.
Okay, wow.
Yeah. So the 2015 season for the Tiger heavyweights was pretty remarkable. Again, the varsity medals at sprints and IRAs. The JV8 won sprints and also medal at the IRA. So Greg and Matt Smith, that was his first year with the crew. Took the boys to Henley that summer. They took 3/8, and so there was this like incredible energy sort of pulsating throughout the program at the time. And so there I was at the ripe old age of 24, just kind of like trying to be a fly on the wall, but also I think the big thing from Greg kind of getting into that was like he'd be like, Reid, make it your own thing, like get involved on the level that you want to be involved with, right? So the way that looked early on was a lot of small boat coaching with the varsity athletes, guys like Martin Baraxo, Tom George, Nick Mead, Pat Ebel. These are all guys that have now gone on to represent their countries internationally and done incredibly well. So kind of getting into the mix right away there, and then also working on a program for the novice walk-ons that a lot of our sport has sort of gone away from that at the collegiate level, but there is still an element of that. So the other intern assistants and I would go up to campus with the boathouse being set on the back end of campus, sort of at the bottom of the hill. We'd walk up the hill to go to these like student fairs during freshman orientation, and just talk to kids and just kind of see what's what and all that. So running that novice walk-on program that fall. And then the other big thing and this is where things were really interesting for me, was I ended up spending an incredible amount of my time during practice in Greg's launch.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's sort of maybe the reason why you're at Pelham and sort of why you're able to run a program. Like, you're spending so much time.
Right.
And what people don't understand is people outside of rowing don't know who Greg is, right? They don't know how good of a coach he is.
That's right.
It would be as if you're sitting next to Luke Walton at UCLA every single day, right? Watching him train his athletes. Like, if you did that for 2 years, you'd be the head coach of some basketball place somewhere else, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, the sky's sort of the limit with that sort of thing. But I think the bigger point here, and again, I'll get more into the launch stuff with Greg in a second, and we sort of talked about this yesterday with sort of, you guys were asking me like how I got the job at Princeton and like the persistence and just like, squeaky wheel gets the grease sort of thinking, right? A lot of young coaches, and I've seen this time and again, where they think that they know, right? And that's fine. It really is okay. Like, we all have an inherent understanding of the stroke. If you've taken strokes at a decent level in high school or college, right? Like, you can understand the basics of like leverage and sort of where the blade needs to go in. But to be quite honest, and I was guilty of this at the time too, thinking like I wasn't a know-it-all, but I certainly had a bit of an ego where it was like, yeah, like I coached this group at Saugatuck the year before, they were kicking ass and taking names, so to speak. And it wasn't like I needed to be served a cold case of humble pie, but I certainly needed to understand that I inherently had no idea how to coach rowing. And so
yeah, you know why? Because you barely rowed. I mean, like, right. Yeah, you did Penn AC and you did Salisbury, you did all these, like right. You're a great athlete, but you never actually spent time coaching, like high volumes.
Right. And so that was a tough transition for me, because I went from like having my own launch and coaching up a group of novice athletes at Saugatuck to sitting in Greg's launch. And so I think being a young coach, like, that's super important to realize, is just like with our athletes and how demanding we can be with their technical approach and the sort of like the walk or the crawl before you can walk, the walk before you can run, so to speak. It's the same thing with coaching. And so that was a real blessing in disguise. And I'm really glad that I was able to see it that way and really take advantage of it. So yeah, like that. So learning through osmosis and just being Greg's muse in a lot of ways was really incredible. Like, he really would bounce ideas off of me, and I'd sort of sit there and be like, yeah, that looks great. You know what I mean? Just trying to be supportive of the boss and because he's got so much experience both domestically and internationally with rowing, as we know. And so that was just a lot of learning practice management, how to deal with different situations that can come up, whether they're in practice or on land, meetings before and after. Sure, a lot of it was like learning the finer art of the stroke, but really what I sort of started to figure out was Greg and these other Eastern Sprints IRA coaches as well, that are well known in our sport. They have a real command presence. And when they walk in the room, it's not like guys stand at attention, right? But there's certainly this element of, this is their team and it's their direction, and it's up to us as assistant coaches and the athletes to sort of figure out, okay, where can I best support this vision, and how can I, make the greater enterprise, succeed. So a lot of my launch stuff with Greg was this heart rate program called First Beat, and Greg, being the guy that he is very innovative. And he really likes the Peach system, right? Measuring the force on the gate and the force curves and so on and so forth. And then the thing that he introduced to the program that fall, again, was called this program called First Beat. That was one of my very first experiences with the team and Greg as well. He handed me a brand new computer and a software program and said, ready, go. And so it was up to me to kind of figure out how to put the protocols into place using their software. I actually ended up getting to know their rep really well, this guy by the name of John, because, like, and that's the other thing about Greg, like, he's a busy guy, and this is something that a lot of coaches also need to understand. You have to be incredibly self-resilient and reliant, right? And so I had so many questions that I was sort of afraid to ask, but what I realized was when I would ask for help and I would just not be afraid of Greg judging me for asking those questions, or the other assistant coaches, or this guy, John, who was the rep for First Beat, I made inroads really quickly in that sense. Like, it was a really good moment for me to be like, I don't know everything and I need to learn so much. So
there's two things that you said that I really want to dive into a little bit. And again, don't think that I'm not listening if I interrupt you.
No, not at all.
But you're touching on things that I think coaches need to hear. You said, first off, you said they command the presence, and which I've experienced, like they do. But you said, where can I support their vision? Do you think it's essential that the assistant coaches believe in that vision? And do you think in order for it to work, or do you think that there are a lot of assistant coaches that go in just don't trust that vision of the leader?
Yeah, I think that's definitely it. There's obviously, like the way you're posing it, there's two sides to it, right? You know, as people, as athletes, we inherently believe that what we've done has a lot of value, right? Especially if we've gotten to a high level of our chosen sport or profession, and that's all fair and good. But I think, especially as an assistant coach, you really have to check your ego like constantly, and just understand that a guy like a Greg Hughes or a Steve Gladstone or Chris Kerber or Mike Tatey, right? Some of these big names in our sport, like, you know, using men as an example, like Lori Daphne, another great example, you know, Princeton women's coach for so many years, so much success. These people have dedicated their lives to this, right? And they have been doing this in most cases 30 plus years. I'm 29, you know, like, and so I think that's really important to remember. And age isn't always a factor. And it's not just a sheer number of years that you've been coaching, but they're at that level for a reason. So there's always a balance between, you know, making it your own thing and trying to really learn through your own process, and also really kind of, again, supporting their vision. So I think the best assistant coaches do a lot of both. They have their own ideas. They're not afraid to, you know, speak up, not in a combative way, not in a destructive way. And that's something that I really learned from Greg too. He had 3 assistant coaches on staff, with myself included, Matt Smith, Phil Brunner, as well. And the 4 of us were meeting constantly about different nuances that we would see. And Greg would very much ask the opinions of us assistant coaches. And so, it's really important that you have that dialogue.
Yeah, that's encouraging. When I went out with Gladstone back in January, I've known Mike Gennaro for quite a long time. He's, you know, St. Joe's guy and up in my area. He's also extremely successful at the world level of rowing. I remember observing them. I took a step back. I watched them because, you know, and any athlete around those two people, I think would have conflicting feelings, because you got one guy who's won at the world level. He's trained at the highest possible level, and you know, you have the other guy who's like arguably the best IRA coach of all time.
Sure.
And what was awesome was, I think Gladstone recognized that and let Gennaro do his own thing and said, you follow the framework of what we're trying to do. You do the workouts that we're trying to do. You know, stay within this boundary. I don't care what you do, just stay here. And that's, I think that right there shows the strength of a coach. And I think that a lot of those coaches that have been doing it for 30 or 40 years learned that over a period of time, because most coaches that we're talking about at the highest level have that exact mentality, and they've learned that over a period of time, right? Because eventually these assistant coaches like you, Reid, eventually you might be the program head coach of Princeton. Sure. You might be the whatever, and they know that, right? I think these coaches at our level in our sport, but even at college or hockey or baseball, they hire assistants that they know they're going to do this for the rest of their lives. They see it in them, they hear it, they look at it, they know it, and then they do that. So my other question that I wanted to know, and this is really just for potential athletes that want to row for Greg. Yeah. How much volume was Greg doing for workouts? Were you guys doing like 20K, 30K a day, or was it slightly different at Princeton?
That's a great question, Alex, because I'm not giving away the secret sauce here by any means, but
We wanted so bad.
I know, everyone does. At the height of our reign, because my 2 years were incredibly successful. The program was incredibly successful at a very much a national and regional level. We had 10 guys at one point under 6 minutes, and so when you're able to put together boats that sort of have that juice, everyone sort of wants to know, okay, what's the training plan? And I get this.
They didn't win the IRA. They didn't win the IRA.
Nope. But that's the level of the IRA. I mean, these IRA boats are legitimately under 23 senior level all-star boats, and they just happen to be in this country competing collegiately for our programs.
In the 1930s.
Yeah.
And the 1950s, we were sending college boats to the Olympics and the World Championships. Right. We basically recreated that in 2020, right? Like, these college boats could theoretically represent the U.S. and medal at some of the highest races in the world.
Theoretically. I mean, if you look at the 2018 World Cup 3 in Lucerne, Mike Callahan took that under 23 8 that ended up winning Worlds. They put up an incredible first 1500. They kind of bonked in the last 5, which made sense because they're clearly he was peaking them for the under 23s about a month later. But those guys, again, pure American crew, going toe to toe with the Aussies, the Germans, and the Dutch, right? So
4 of those guys were UW guys, right? I think it was like 4 or 5 of them were like all UW.
It's ridiculous. I mean, so that, again, that speaks to the level of collegiate rowing at this point, in especially on the men's heavyweight side. But the training itself at Princeton, Matt Smith and I did the math one time because we get this question all the time from recruits. Was like, what do you guys do? Like, what's the volume? Are you crushing these guys? And no. Greg's training plan at the height of it was, and again, this was Matt Smith and I did together at one point, was about 90 to 100K a week on an erg machine, which if you break that down, that's roughly averaging 6 workouts as a team, right? That's roughly averaging about 16, 17K on a machine, which at that level really doesn't seem like a whole lot. So what about
on the water? So on the water training.
Yeah, I'd say it was about the same, Alex, because, obviously you have to keep in mind that these are student athletes and there's a lot of demands on them in many different ways, both academically and socially. Princeton itself is a very social campus with the eating club setup. And so those are sort of like, I don't want to make light of them, but in my eyes, they're kind of glorified fraternities and sororities that call themselves eating clubs. They're awesome. They're very much a part of the fabric of the university. But mix the academic and social obligations of these kids, and you've got to be very precise and pretty accurate with their time demands. So what that ends up looking like, especially at Princeton under Greg's training plan, is a lot of intensity. And
okay, let me like consolidate this down really quick.
Yeah.
So, as college athletes, you're restricted for NCAA rules, college rules. You can't do a whole lot.
Right.
But you're averaging 16K a day. How much do you think these guys were doing on their own training? So doing an extra 10K a day or 5K, or how often do you think they sat in the weight room, to prepare themselves?
I had a good view of that. Obviously, like I mentioned yesterday, I lived in the boathouse. I would say that on any given day, especially like the sort of higher end guys, like sort of in the top 8, 12, 16 of the team, yeah, like they'd come in and they'd get, they'd do some RP3 work, or they might ask an assistant coach to check them out in the tank room, or get some extra reps in the weight room. But that I wouldn't say that was done with an incredible amount of consistency. And that's not to knock those guys. It's just, again, you have to remember that their demands are so incredible up on campus. So I can't put a number on that for you guys. Like, I think that every athlete was sort of on his own journey, and that's something else that Greg was really good about. He wasn't overbearing with that stuff. But because of the intensity that we were doing, and I know this so well because of the heart rate training program that I was running for the team, these guys were getting an incredible amount of rowing specific training in the short amount of time that we had them every day.
So one of the arguments that we talked about on Coaches Yelling, which again you'll be doing with us, is and you're going to lose because you talk a lot and you have 1 minute to state your case. So I'm excited to have you on. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm just messing with you, man, because
all good.
I love it. I gave you a lot of compliments yesterday. It's the argument of, is 4x20 ruining the sport? Is it hurting our future? Is it burning us out? And clearly what you're saying is, and this rings true with Gladstone and a lot of others, lower volume, higher intensity, more focus, and you will be just as successful, if not more, than anyone just doing 4x20 3 days a week. And that's also with high school athletes and with masters athletes. I mean, as long as you focus on that intensity, because look, in today's world, you know this, there's distractions everywhere. If you come into a practice and you're distracted, you can do 4x20 or you can do 3x10 and get the same quality of workout, right? Sure. If you're focused doing the 3x10 versus the 4x20. So, all right. So just again, because of time, I want to move into, get me to your last month or two at Princeton and how you got to Pelham, because that's a big jump, right? Like it's a big difference because it's a pivot for you. You're like, all right, well, I'm not going to run a college program. I'd like to go high school. So tell me about that.
Yeah. So that summer of 2017, after I wrapped up my second year with Greg, I mean, you know, those intern type positions do have a shelf life for sure. He and I did talk about, you know, potentially coming back for a third and final year in a more elevated role, still as the kind of quote unquote intern, still living in the boathouse apartment, but just, you know, kind of giving me more to do in that sense. But
Reid, I'm sorry to ask this. I forgot to ask this. Did you get a degree at Princeton while you were doing this?
No, I didn't. And that's a big question I do get. No, that was not part of the deal.
Okay. All right.
Those graduate programs are very small and incredibly academic. In any case, I, you know, just like every other intern volunteer collegiate coach in the country, I was applying out and sort of seeing what would stick. I got very close on a few that, you know, did not go my way, and that was totally fine. I mean, obviously those hurt when you don't get them, but again, you just sort of realize, okay, I'm learning a lot and I'm sort of figuring out what these, you know, for lack of a better term, these CEOs of these programs like and don't like. So I was applying out, talking with Greg, talking with Matt Smith, talking with other coaches in the boathouse, just like seeing where I could land. And the end of July 2017 was rolling around, and Henrik Rummel had just started pivoting away from his, you know, training center stuff with the U.S. men's team. Henrik being who he is, we all know who he is most likely. If you haven't lived under a rock these past 10 years, he's been the top U.S. or he was the top U.S. rower, as you know, as on starboard side for many years. You know, London Olympic, you know, bronze medalist in the men's straight 4 under Tim McLaren. Anyway, he and I didn't really know each other per se, but because he was training there and because I was friends with a lot of his friends that were on the team as well, he sort of started feeling around for coaches because he had taken the director's position at Pelham Community Rowing that summer. And his whole idea there was to sink his teeth into, you know, teaching, you know, these youth kids at Pelham sort of a different way of being an athlete and being a student athlete and whatnot. So, you know, he was looking for qualified people that, you know, full-time with health benefits, that whole thing, right? Like a real job, to run the boys program. And so I'd been applying out, you know, some things were looking promising, but then, you know, at the last second, it was like they went with the other guy. All good. So through some contacts on the national team, they approached me and they were like, hey, dude, like, would you be interested in working with Henrik Rummel up at this place called Pelham? And I was like, no, why would I want to do that? You know, that's high school rowing. Like I left that. And what ended up doing it for me was a mixture of Henrik Rummel being who he is, right, to be fair, and his presence, and also a board member of the club and I have a long-standing relationship dating back to about 2013, 2014. So I said no 2 or 3 times.
Wow.
And then finally, I was just like, you know what? This is close to home for me. Pelham is 30 minutes from where I grew up in Darien.
Yep.
I can sort of reconnect with my family in that way. I love the area, obviously being from here, and I get to work with Henrik and get to build my own program. And he was adamant that he would let me build my own program, and he stood by that. And I owe him a lot of thanks for that, because again, like here I was, a 26, 27-year-old guy who knew something about rowing at this point because of my years with Princeton and Greg, but still very kind of green. And obviously, my resume looked like potatoes compared to Henrik's.
Sure.
So that's sort of how I transitioned out, because I again, like, he was adamant that I could run my own program and we could really do this together. So I accepted the job, and a week later in August 2017, preseason started.
And you've been there now. This is 2 years.
Yeah. So August 2017. So August of this year will be 3 full years with me and the club. And you know, to be as honest as possible, it didn't really look like rowing when I first got there. It was very much on a recreational, social club level, and that's totally cool, right? Like different strokes for different folks, so to speak. But between the board members of Pelham Community Rowing and sort of what the area demands, with Row America Rye being right up the road, Saugatuck and Greenwich being right up the road,
Yep.
You know, the club needed to kind of pivot a little bit. And this is not to knock anything that the coaches previously were doing or not doing. It's just to say that there needed to be a different model in order to, you know, be relevant and be sustainable in this climate of high performing athletics in Westchester and Fairfield County. So there I was. I'll never forget this, and I tell the kids this all the time. They'll never forget this either. I was talking to a group of about 35 of them one day at preseason. I go, guys, how many of you have ever broken 7 minutes for 2,000 meters on an erg? And 2 of them raised their hand. 2. I had 2. And
it's not even 10%.
And 7 minutes is absolutely nothing at the high school level for boys anymore. It just it doesn't mean anything. So I had 2, and we've now gotten up to 17 or 18 under 7, and with another 8 of those guys under 640 and 3 or 4 under 630. So we've really made a humongous shift, and really the credit goes to the board being very supportive in that idea of changing the framework of the club, and the parents and the kids supporting the vision as well. So we've gone from a pretty recreational outfit, well supported, because again, the way that this club started was it's kind of an offshoot of the New York Athletic Club, because it's right across the river on Travers Island. And these are men and women on our board that really wanted to support a youth rowing program for Westchester County. So they've been nothing but supportive. These kids are taking everything on that I have to give them. They're seeing the benefits of it. This fall I'll have kids rowing at Washington, Wisconsin, MIT, Tufts,
wow,
University of California, San Diego. So we've made a lot of changes in a short amount of time.
Let me ask you this: you've successfully been able to be at every level of rowing and coached it and been a part of it. So you've done boarding school rowing, you've done summer rowing, you've done high school novice, high school varsity, college. Where do you see yourself in 10 years? Do you want to go to the collegiate level again? Do you love the high school level? Like what have you now thought of at 29 years old? If you could fast forward the button a little bit, where would you want to be?
Ideally, Alex, I'd love to run Princeton. That's certainly, I think there's no secret about that, given my family's history there and sort of my love for that place. Obviously, guys like Greg have a super long shelf life, and I fully respect that and understand that. And those guys are doing a great job in their positions. So just to be to be honest about that, yeah, I think that would be a very ideal scenario for me. But, and again, I get asked this question a lot, and I see it more as sort of, where am I in my trajectory, and am I able to be my best self and give to that club or that college or whatnot at that time. And if I feel like I'm doing that, then I'll be there, and I'll be there for the long term. I'm not looking to hop around, you know what I mean? And because I think when I first took this job at Pelham, everyone was sort of like, well, I did get a few of those like, dude, what are you doing? Like, this doesn't make sense. But I think the biggest thing is, it's like, look at what we've been able to build in such a short amount of time. Yeah. You know, it just takes a little bit of a mindset switch, and you really do have to bet on yourself. And that's the most important thing, is like, look, you can bounce around from these volunteer intern jobs all you want, but until you're behind the wheel and the launch yourself and driving the ship, like, you don't really know what you're made of. And so, like, I want to take Pelham Community Rowing as far as I and we can take it. And right now, obviously, given the COVID-19 situation, we're not able to do that. What I can tell you is this: we would have had an incredibly competitive boys 4 come out of Pelham this spring. This is just sheer numbers based. The data is there to back it up. This Cox 4 would have been incredible. And so I think there's some unfinished business there. And I've got a lot of kids coming back that are really hungry. And so again, I feel like if I can be the best version of myself and the club supports that vision, I'm going to be there, and I'm going to work my butt off to make that place better. And so I think that focusing on that day to day and that process will get me to where I want to go, and get the people that I'm working with, you know, where they want to go as well. So
there's nothing more exciting. There's nothing more energizing than meeting someone who states very clearly they're doing what they love, and they're doing what they're meant to be doing, right? I think, and forgive me for tying myself in here, I knew when I took over Resolute and when we built Rower's Choice, I knew I was doing exactly what I was meant to do for the rest of my life. And it creates a positive energy around you, and people gravitate towards that. You're the same way. You found something that you want to do. You're not egotistical about it. You're not, you're not loud about it, but you know where you want to go, and that's encouraging, and that gets people bought into the Reid Johnson story, right? And gets bought into your future. You know, there's this thing, and I'm going to close with this. I'm just like, there's luck, there's will, there's guts, right? All these things come into play. You've been very fortunate to just be around a lot of successful rowing in your career so far, right? You're a guy that came in at the right time at Salisbury. You're the guy that, you know, at the time Penn AC in 2008, 2009, when there were national IRA champions around you, and seeing what rowing could be doing. And then this is sheer luck, because you have nothing to do with this. Your grandfather won an Eastern Sprints medal at Princeton and had a big impact on Princeton. And now you're around Henrik Rummel and people that have decided they want to take a fun club to be competitive. Yep. You're very fortunate. You're very lucky to have all that stuff. And you're also very driven. So that combination will undoubtedly make you successful in your career. I'm very excited to be a part of it now. I'm very excited to watch this happen, because like what I experience, what I think is going to happen when you and I'm 34, you're 29, when we're both 50, 55, and we're at US Rowing Convention, laughing our asses off as you're the head coach of Princeton, and we're having a beer, and we built the biggest rowing company in the world. I mean, like that's going to be a fun thing, and I'm excited to be part of your story.
I appreciate that.
And I really hope that coaches that listen to this and watch this can soak some of this stuff in, that they, you have a lot of experience, and I hope that they take your story and compare it to theirs, and hopefully learn from you. And I'm excited for that. So, Reid Johnson, thanks for being here for part 2 of 2.
Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity. And I also just want to take a moment to say, Alex, is what you said as well. Like, if there are any young coaches out there listening to this, I was obviously not in your shoes very long ago at all, and it can feel really daunting and scary and confusing. certainly feel free to reach out, via Instagram or email, whatnot, pcrarowing.com. You can find me there. Reach out. I'm all ears. I want to help.
That's a huge thing. Just gave me chills because I had written down as one of my ideas, we need to have a coaches mentor platform. We need to have a place
badly.
The young coaches
badly
can go to a platform and say, oh, I'd love to talk to Reid Johnson.
Yes.
And have a little profile on him and a little button like email. That I think is something that we could put together here.
Great.
Be awesome. Reid Johnson, thank you very much. And this is another Rower's Choice Zoomcast podcast interview. I hope you've enjoyed listening and watching.
Thanks, guys.
This is the Rower's Choice podcast. Rower's Choice is made up of Finish Line Shell Repair, Resolute Racing Shells, and Sykes USA.